Hello, welcome to this All 24 video. Today we're just going to talk about some really basic concepts when we're talking about setting up or constructing a defense in Canadian football. I just wanted to start right from scratch with this video, and we're just going to go over a few basic concepts that we think about going into each season. We're trying to construct our defense to put our players in the best position possible for them to be successful. So we'll just get right into it here. Really simply, we're just going to talk about a little bit about defensive philosophy or identity. We're going to talk about personnel, and then we're just going to get into a couple of fronts, which is just where we like to start when we're talking about our defense for that year. And then in later videos, we'll go on and talk about some of the back end things that we think about when we're putting that defense together. So on day one, or when we start thinking about that next season, early in the off season, we want to start thinking about what our identity is going to be as a defense. So when we say that, we're not yet talking about, are we going to be a three-man front or a four-man front, or what kind of plays we're going to call. What we're really talking about here is, are we a veteran team? Are we going to be able to rely on our experience, maybe put a little more on our players as far as playbook? Or are we maybe that year we're a fast team? We're going to rely on our speed. We're going to attack offenses that way. Maybe we're a tough team, right? We're a gritty team that year, and we want to, get things set around that. So whatever your identity is for that given year, I think that's a good place to start, and it's going to help you answer questions later on when it comes to making decisions about your play calls and your install. After that, we get into personnel. So now when we're talking about personnel, now it is more about, are we going to be a four-man front? Are we going to base out of a three-man front? Do we have more experienced players at linebacker or defensive line or in the secondary? And now you can start thinking about how you're going to construct things that way. Obviously, we always want to put our players in the best possible position to succeed. So when you're putting a player on a field in a certain position, you want to make sure you're not asking them to do something that they can't do. So if you're trying to get that extra linebacker on the field by putting him at halfback or free safety, I suggest you make sure that in your play calls and in your schemes, you're not asking that player to do things that they can't do, and that's obviously going to put them in good position. So personnel is huge. You want to see where you're deep and start constructing things around that as you go. Then you want to, name your positions. So each position out there, some coaches I've talked to have different names that they like to call their, Sam linebacker or different names for different linebacker positions. So you want to do something that's consistent. A basic way to do it is to name your outside DBs, those are your corners, and then you have your halfbacks moving in and your free safety. On the defensive line, there's a few standard ways to do it. We go rush, tackle, nose, anchor. Again, nothing is wrong there. If you have a different name for one of those positions, that's fine. Just, again, try to be consistent. And then Sam, Mike, and Will, linebacker. So once you have those names in place, it's easy to talk about it with your players. You can save time later on in the season. A very standard way to do it when you're starting to talk about constructing that front now is you want to have some naming and numbering systems in place to, again, invest that little bit of time in your training camp. Spend 5 or 10 minutes talking about what you mean when you say A gap, B gap, 1 tech, 3 tech, and that's going to just save you time throughout the course of the season. So a really standard way to do it is when we're naming the gaps, which are the spaces in between the offensive linemen, we go A, B, C, and then D gap. If there is that extra wing or tight end, and same thing to the boundary side, we'd go A, B, and C. So a very standard way of doing it. That's very common. Then you want to number your shades. So this is where your players are going to line up. Again, if you have something in place, you can save time, on game day, on the sidelines. If you're making an adjustment, this saves you time later on. So there's a few standard things here, and there's a few things that I've seen different with different coaches. Usually the head-up alignments are even numbers. So here you have a 2 tech, a 4 tech. This would be a 0 tech, head up on the center. Then a 6 tech would be head up on the tight end or the wing. Now, for a 1 tech, I've seen some coaches call a 1 tech this inside shade of the guard. Some coaches, a 1 tech for them means shading the center. So neither of those is wrong. You just want to make sure, again, you're consistent. And then we make a 4-eye, the inside shade of the tackle. A 5 tech would be the outside shade of the tackle. And then a 3 tech, which is pretty standard, would be the outside shade of the guard. So, again, a little bit of investment of time. Naming those shades will save you time later in the season as long as you, again, are consistent. Then we get into our front. So now we have our positions, we have our personnel, we have our gaps, and we have our shades. So now up front is just putting those things together. So this is a standard, what a lot of people call an over front. So this is shifted over towards the field side. So we're shifted to the wide side of the field. And again, we've just taken players and assigned them shades and gaps. So now our rush is a 5 tech, and he has the C gap. Our tackle would be a 3 tech, and he's the B gap player. Nose is in a 1 tech, controlling the A gap, and our anchor is in a 5 tech as a C gap player. What we do is we just add a 0 to it for our linebackers. They're that next level. So this for us would be a 10 tech. So basically a 1 tech, but 5 yards off. And then our will is a 40-I, which is inside shade of that tackle. And again, about 5 yards off the line of scrimmage. Now we have our Sam, who in this particular case is a free hitter. So he's going to add in based on where that fullback goes. So we don't know what gap he has yet. And we'll talk about some specifics of that, maybe in a run fit video at a different time. So that's a base over front. So you have your players in their specific gaps. You're ready to start thinking about playing football. Obviously, there's a lot of technique involved, but you're starting to construct your defense. The other standard front you'll see is an under front. So now we're just shifted towards the boundary side, and our linebackers have moved to handle the open gaps. Now, one decision that you're going to want to make is involving these two interior defensive linemen. So what some teams will do, will have one player designated as the 3 tech. So if you have, say, your tackle, who's always the 3 tech, he will move from the field side in an over front to the boundary side in an under front. There's advantages and disadvantages to that. Obviously, you're tipping things a little bit. It's harder to shift in and out of your fronts. So what a lot of teams will do, they'll have a field player and a boundary player, and they will line up in the appropriate shade. So here we have our tackle as the 1 tech, our nose as the 3 tech, and our backers, again, are handling those open gaps. So again, just assigning with one word now, we can say under. You can make an under call, and all of your players that are on the field know what their shades are, what their gap responsibilities are, and now we can play football. And then after that, if you get that concept as a defense, if your players understand that, you can really put together whatever you want. You can get unorthodox with it if you have a good tell on your opponent, or really just again, combine anything you want as far as a front. So here's just a few examples. You can have an even front. Now our tackle and our nose are both 2 tech players, which frees up our linebackers to kind of flow and react. You can have a tight front where your tackle and nose are both 1 tech players. And again, your linebackers are handling those extra gaps. Or you can get into an odd front where now you have a 0 tech and a 3 tech. And now you have a little bit of a bubble here, and you teach your linebackers how they're going to fill and handle that area. So really, again, understanding the concept of having your personnel, your gaps, and your shade alignments. Once you put those things together, that's how we start constructing our fronts. You want to, again, put your players in an advantageous position where they can use their strengths and work together as a defense. Those are a few of the concepts that I wanted to cover. If you have any questions, feel free to visit us at all24.ca and send us a message there, and we'll look forward to the next video. Thanks.